crash and burn.
Hey everyone. So tonight I wanted to discuss HBO's
Trying to make a movie tonight?
YouTube.
We're making porno.
I wanted to discuss HBO's sort of long-running documentary regarding three petty criminals slash drug addicts that they follow from 1984 till I believe 2020, and the documentary is entitled Life of Crime. Now, there have been, I believe, 2 of these released. The first one, the one that I'm talking about here, is essentially an hour long, and then the second Life of Crime, it tacks on the first one that I'm talking about here, and then it extends it further by going and telling their story right up until 2020. I always found that kind of strange. I don't understand what HBO's motivation for that was exactly, because it's odd, because usually HBO would just split it up into 2 parts, right? Like this would be part 1, and then they would commission part 2 a number of years later, and they wouldn't tack on part 1 to the start of part 2. They would just usually dive into part 2 and make a part 3 and part 4, however many parts they were going to make. But they tacked on part 1 that I'm discussing here onto part 2, and I always found that really odd, because I had to fast forward through part 2, because when I found out there was a part 2, I thought it was going to be a feature-length film, first off, but the only reason that it is feature-length is because part 1 is in there. So you essentially have to fast forward 45, 50 minutes into part 2 in order to start the second half of these 3 people's story. The 3 people in question are Freddie, Robert, and Delirious. They are all petty shoplifters, drug addicts, and in Delirious's case, she's a full-time, part-time prostitute. And out of the 3 of them, at least initially, Rob, he's so young and he's got a certain level of charisma, so you don't mind watching him and his brother go around to stores and shoplift their way into hundreds of dollars worth of profits, so they don't have to find jobs and they get to have fun, do drugs and whatever. And it isn't until a little later on in the film that you discover what a piece of shit his brother is. Because for the first chunk, you don't really think much of his brother. His brother doesn't seem to be that bad of a guy. And so you're just sort of like, oh, these 2 shoplifters. And these guys aren't like shoplifting for sport. These are professional shoplifters. These guys will go into a store and they will take hundreds of dollars worth of merchandise. And then, of course, they know a fence somewhere out on the streets of New York. You see them take the gear to the fence, and then they sell it off to them for a decent profit, too. And they do this a lot. And even though they've been caught a bunch of times, because it's shoplifting, when it's theft under, or it's, you don't get hit with a robbery charge, there's pretty much a slap on the wrist. You're released with a promise to appear or whatever, and then you're back on the street, free to shoplift again. And like I said, you don't really find out much about his brother until all of a sudden they're at Rob's house, and his brother, whose name I can't remember, and quite frankly, I don't give a fuck. I don't want to know his name. He shows up with his girlfriend who's pregnant. And of course, right there, it's an eye-rolling moment, because these fucking people, they're always so potent. I don't understand what it is. It seems to be the more fucked up your life is, the bigger of a fuck up you are, the more drugs you do, the more drugs you sell, the more shit you steal, the more potent your sperm or your womb is. And I don't get that. Darwin had that law, or that rule, that said that the stupid sort of weed out themselves, they eliminate themselves, and I've never really agreed with that. I've always felt like the dangerous and the stupid breed like mice. And in this case, certainly no exception here, because Rob's piece of shit brother shows up with his pregnant girlfriend and everything seems okay. And then all of a sudden, there's a massive amount of domestic violence caught on camera, where his brother is smacking the girlfriend around on camera. And she works somewhere, and he just takes her money that she cashed, and he just has it all now. And of course, when the documentary crew asked, they're like, so what's the deal here? So she works and you just take her money? He says, no, we share it. But his father's standing in the background and he's nodding. Yeah, he just takes her paycheck. So not only does he kick the shit out of her physically, but he's kicking the shit out of her financially as well. And I didn't expect that. It almost turned me off watching the rest of the movie. By that point, I was fairly invested. And like I said, this is maybe the better part of an hour. And when I saw him beating the shit out of his girlfriend, it was like, ah, man, this isn't exactly what I signed up for. But then it occurred to me, what did I sign up for? I've been watching these people behave completely wrongly for the last better part of an hour. So is it really that big a shock to find that one of them beats the shit out of their significant other who happens to be pregnant and takes all of their money? Is it really that much of a stretch? So I sort of said, fuck it. I got over it because the domestic violence aspects of it were really off-putting. I didn't expect it to be that graphic. I didn't expect it to hit that hard, or for him to turn on a dime that fast and just kind of go after her. And nobody else does anything because that's kind of the way everybody is. Even the women in these situations are kind of rough and they look like they beat the shit out of you. So nobody's really, there's kids in the room and nobody cares that they're witnessing somebody beat the shit out of somebody else. And I don't know, it completely threw the movie 180 degrees, because up until this point, I thought I was watching some fairly charismatic shoplifters just sort of eke their way through life, stealing shit and selling it on the street for a profit. And then when the domestic violence aspects kicked in, it was just, you're dealing with a whole different breed of person here. These people are not good. And so it ends a little while after there. The beautiful thing about Rob's piece of shit brother is that he's acting all tough and shit about how he's not afraid to go to prison, because at that point, when you see him kicking the shit out of his girlfriend, he's already wanted by the police, but he's hiding out, and he's saying how he can hide out forever, and he's got friends everywhere. And then it cuts to him, of course, and he's in jail, and he's crying. And I fucking loved that we got to see that piece of shit cry. And then that's it. The movie ends a little while later, and they're just kind of going through the motions of leading those lives, and you don't see his brother again. And the judge sentences his brother to, I can't remember how many years, I think it's like 12 years in prison for all of his various offenses, as well as all of his prior convictions. He says that he poses a consistent risk to society, and he locks him up for a good long time. So I really liked that aspect of it. This was a hard watch. It's ugly, it's real, it's honest, it's raw. It is completely captivating, and it is worth watching again and again. It's just the part at the end when the brother beats the shit out of his girlfriend. I just didn't like that. So I think I'll leave it there because this is pushing 8 minutes. So thank you so much for hanging out with me for just about 8 minutes while I discussed HBO's Life of Crime. I'm going to frame it as part 1. I'll eventually do part 2 here, where it talks about the rest of Delirious, Roberts, and Freddie's lives right up until 2020. If you liked this review or discussion of this really obscure documentary, don't forget to do something nice for somebody. And if you choose to check this one out, get ready for that bit of domestic abuse at the end, because I fucking did not see that coming. Thanks. Have a good night. I just wanted to say thank you for making it through the entire video. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to remind everyone one more time, even though I've probably already done this in the video that you just watched, to please click the like button as well as the subscribe button, because it helps this channel grow. And thank you for hitting like and subscribe, and we will see you guys really soon.